The night Thomas Carter gave away his last $18, the sky hung low and heavy over a quiet street in Ohio, and his stomach burned with the familiar ache of hunger he'd learned to ignore. He had no idea that a single choice made under a flickering streetlight would ripple forward with such force that by the next morning, 5 black SUVs would be parked outside his worn-down rental home, changing the course of his life forever. Sometimes the smallest acts, done when no one is watching, become the loudest echoes the world ever hears. Before this story goes any further, if you believe in kindness, second chances, and the idea that doing good still matters in this world, take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to the channel. Stories like this remind us that even when life feels unfair, compassion can still rewrite the ending. Thomas was 38, a single father to his 8-year-old son, Noah, and every day felt like a careful balancing act over a deep drop. After his wife, Rebecca, passed away from a sudden illness 3 years earlier, the world had not slowed down to let him grieve. Bills kept coming, rent climbed higher, and his job at a small auto parts warehouse barely covered the basics. Some nights he skipped dinner entirely so Noah could eat a full meal, telling himself hunger was temporary, pride was not. Their home was small, the paint chipped, the heater unreliable, but it was clean, and it was filled with quiet love that showed itself in packed lunches, bedtime prayers, and old storybooks read under dim lamps. That evening, Thomas had stopped at a corner store after work, counting wrinkled bills in his pocket. $18. That was everything he had until payday, 3 days away. He planned to buy bread, peanut butter, and maybe a carton of eggs if prices hadn't gone up again. As he stepped outside, the cold bit into his hands, and that was when he noticed the man sitting near the curb. He looked out of place, not in the way most people expected from someone asking for help. His coat was worn but clean, his posture tired rather than broken, his eyes sharp but shadowed by exhaustion. There was no sign, no shouting for attention, just a quiet presence that seemed to blend into the night. Thomas almost walked past. He told himself he couldn't afford to help anyone else when his own life felt like it was hanging by a thread. But then he thought of Noah, of the lessons he tried to live by, not just speak. He thought of the countless times strangers had looked through him when he'd needed help most. His feet slowed, his chest tightened, and before fear could talk him out of it, he reached into his pocket. He placed the $18 into the man's hand without asking questions, without expecting gratitude, without even giving his name. He walked away with empty pockets and a strange calm in his chest, unsure if he'd just made a terrible mistake or the only choice he could live with. That night, Thomas lay awake listening to the old heater rattle, wondering how he'd stretch the next few days. Noah slept peacefully in the next room, unaware of the quiet calculations his father made in the dark. There was fear, yes, but also a faint sense of peace, the kind that comes from acting in alignment with who you want to be, even when the cost feels high. Life had taught Thomas that doing the right thing didn't guarantee reward, but it did let him sleep with his conscience intact. Morning came faster than he expected. As sunlight crept through thin curtains, a low rumble echoed down the street. Thomas frowned, thinking maybe there was construction nearby, but the sound grew louder, heavier. When he stepped onto the porch, his breath caught in his throat. 5 black SUVs sat parked in front of his house, their polished surfaces reflecting the tired look on his face. Men in dark suits stood near them, scanning the surroundings with calm focus. For a split second, panic surged through him. He wondered if something terrible had happened, if there was a mistake, if his quiet life had somehow drawn the wrong kind of attention. Neighbors peeked through curtains. Whispers spread down the block. Thomas felt exposed, small, like his struggles were suddenly on display for everyone to see. One of the men approached him, his expression respectful, measured. Thomas braced himself for bad news, his heart pounding so hard he could hear it in his ears. But what followed wasn't accusation or threat. It was gratitude, delivered with a seriousness that made his knees weak. The man explained that the stranger Thomas had helped the night before was named Jonathan Reed, a successful businessman who had disappeared intentionally for a few days after facing a personal crisis that money couldn't fix. Jonathan had lost his teenage son in a tragic accident months earlier, and the weight of it had hollowed him out. He'd walked the streets that night not because he needed money, but because he needed proof that kindness still existed when he felt the world had taken everything from him. Most people had avoided him, some had offered spare change without eye contact. But Thomas had given everything he had, quietly, without judgment, without knowing who Jonathan was. Jonathan had watched from a distance as Thomas walked away, shoulders heavy but heart intact. That moment, the man explained, had stopped him from making a decision he could never undo. It reminded him that love still lived in small, unseen acts. By morning, Jonathan knew he had to find the man who'd unknowingly given him more than money. He had to say thank you, not with words alone, but with action. Inside the house, Noah watched wide-eyed as strangers stood in their living room, the worn furniture suddenly feeling out of place. Jonathan Reed entered last, his presence calm, his face marked by grief and resolve. He looked at Thomas not as a savior or a charity case, but as an equal. What followed was not a dramatic reveal or a flashy announcement, but a quiet, life-altering shift. Jonathan explained that he had set up a trust to cover Thomas's rent for the next 2 years, paid off his lingering medical bills from Rebecca's illness, and arranged a scholarship fund for Noah's education. He also offered Thomas a stable position at one of his distribution companies, with hours that would let him be present as a father. Thomas struggled to process it all. His first instinct was disbelief, then resistance, then overwhelming emotion. He had never helped anyone expecting reward, and accepting help felt unfamiliar, almost undeserved. But Jonathan reminded him that kindness was not a transaction, it was a chain reaction. One act had saved a life, another could rebuild one. As the SUVs eventually drove away, the street returned to its usual quiet, but nothing felt the same. Word spread, not just of the money or the mystery, but of the choice that started it all. Thomas didn't become rich overnight, and his life didn't turn into a fairy tale. There were still hard days, still grief that surfaced unexpectedly, still the work of healing. But there was also stability, breathing room, and a renewed belief that the world could be gentle in unexpected ways. In the weeks that followed, Thomas volunteered at local shelters, not because he felt he owed the world something, but because he finally had enough to give without losing himself. Noah watched his father stand a little taller, smile a little easier, and learned a lesson no textbook could teach. Kindness mattered. Integrity mattered. Who you were when no one was watching mattered most of all. Before this story ends, take a moment and comment below with one word that describes how this story made you feel. Your words might be exactly what someone else needs to read today. If this story touched your heart, if it reminded you that even small acts can carry enormous power, please like this video, share it, and leave a comment. Your engagement helps these stories reach others who are quietly struggling, just like Thomas once was. Sometimes hope doesn't arrive loudly. Sometimes it shows up as $18 handed to a stranger in the cold, and everything changes from there.